Then going on to the IPO. So the IPO process was certainly an interesting roadshow. There's Deepak, who I think did an amazing job on the roadshow. But it was funny. I mean, would meet with potential investors. Tesla is a company that tends to inspire either love or hate. People are rarely indifferent. Like, if you say like, well, how do you feel about Colgate? I'm like, it's okay. But with Tesla, it's like either it's like you guys suck or you're great, or like yay. So it's like it tends to be very much a either love it or hate it. And so in the IPO roadshow, we'd sometimes meet with investors who would tell us just how stupid we were and that this was a waste of money and how dare we even take their time. I'm like, okay, thank you. And they would meet with some that are like, yeah, you guys, this is great. We're all in. We have like some great investors like Fidelity who, despite all sort of the negative news and stuff, has been like a stalwart supporter of Tesla through the years. So anyway, like that was the IPO, that was it was an arduous IPO, but we managed to raise, get Tesla public, and just sort of clean up the capital structure and raise a bunch of money from the public markets. Shortly after that, we became one of the most shorted stocks on the NASDAQ. So, for quite a while there, we were trading places as the most shorted stock on the stock market. I think we were trading places with Skullcandy, Travelzoo, and Coinstar. But for who would be the most shorted? Okay, so anyway, then sort of, next big thing. Well, this was, also in 2010, and kind of time-wise, approximately the same time as the IPO, is that we met with Toyota, and Akio Toyota actually, came by and we had breakfast at my house, and he was sort of really interested in working with innovative technology companies, and so we thought, well, what are the ways that we could potentially work together? And we came up with three things. One was to do a sort of a joint EV program to do the new electric RAV4. The other was buying the Fremont factory, the former NUMMI facility, because Toyota had decided to shut down the NUMMI facility. And it's understandable because it was half owned by GM, half owned by Toyota, and it was half owned by like the portion, like the what was considered the bad portion of GM. GM got split into two pieces. One was called Liquidation Motors. So half of NUMMI was owned by Liquidation Motors, half by Toyota, and it just sort of didn't make sense for Toyota to kind of be in that kind of a partnership. So they decided to shut down the NUMMI plant, and we said, well, this is kind of huge it's a huge plant for Tesla, and we don't have much money, but we'd be interested in buying that, and that was one part of the deal, and then the other was like was making an investment at the IPO. So they said, that sounds cool. We'll make a $50 million investment at the IPO, which was actually really helpful to us when we were doing the roadshow, because people would ask us how we're going to compete against big car companies, and we say, look, we've got the Daimler partnership, and Toyota's investing at the IPO. So it's like, those are good signs. These three parts of the deal were independent of each other. So it would be either all three could work out, or none of the three could work out. So they weren't tied together. They were just sort of three things that we thought would be good. So again, I'd like to thank Toyota for their support, and they were a huge help to Tesla. So thank you, Toyota. And then the Model S beta. So finally produced a Model S that was close to the production design, or very close, really. And we unveiled that to the public, and it was quite well received. And we had a lot of people who put down deposits on the car, and that gave us like a big boost of confidence. It's like, wow, people really like the car. It looks like we'll be able to sell enough to pay for the cost of the factory and everything. And so that was, thank you for everyone for those that made those early purchase orders for the Model S. And again, without you, we wouldn't be around. So yeah.
It wasn't quite as exciting as the Roadster, launch event, but it was close. There was definitely some serious drama at this at that first Model S, customer ride event that we had at Fremont, and I definitely remember a few crazy stories. I think at least one point we had one car, completely die with some huge firmware problem, and a thing we've done at all these launch events is we have a kind of a control center in the back somewhere hidden away with a bunch of engineers that can watch the cars via their wireless connection. And I remember this car that basically had a problem. Well, we opened all the doors and the trunk and the hood and everything and put it on display in front of everyone. And meanwhile, the engineers rewrote some of the motor control code in that car to ignore the sensors that had gone wrong and were the problem. So we put it into this kind of limp mode, and then got in and sort of very carefully drove it away at about 10 miles per hour, and it was great. Nobody ever knew there was any problem. We drove it back to the shop, and ultimately it was like one bad temperature sensor that had shorted out and caused this problem. But I think it was really amazing that we could, what we could do with this new software capability, because the Model S was the first time we had that ability to send new software to the car. So it was kind of foreshadowing, I think, how important this has become for the entire production fleet, even on that very first day when we were, giving the first rides to customers.
Yep. So then on to Model S deliveries. Here we go.
Thanks, Nancy.
It's my friend Broly, a stalwart supporter of Tesla from the beginning. So that was a big milestone for the company, delivering the first production Model S's from the Fremont factory, where at the time we were occupying just a tiny corner. And I think that was definitely one of the most joyful experiences in the history of Tesla.
It was a pretty awesome event.
Yeah.
Everyone was just, it's really, everyone had worked so hard for that time, and I think the whole company was there. Every single person, production employees, engineers, sales, everybody crammed in because they were so proud to deliver those first few cars.
Exactly. So, yeah. Right. So we'll go a little faster through some of these later years. Because I think these later years are better chronicled in the press, whereas the early years nobody knew we existed, so that's kind of lost in the midst of time. So we unveiled the supercharger network, which we hadn't actually told anyone about. So when people did the first reservations for the Model S, they had no idea that we were going to create the supercharger network. But we'd built into every car a high voltage DC bypass direct to the pack that would enable high-speed charging. And this was critical to solving the long-distance travel problem. And we were certainly hoping that some other company or companies would create high-speed, convenient high-speed charging networks, but nobody did. So we're like, okay, well, we better do it. So yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, we literally had teams of a few interns that we were sending out to different travel rest stops and trying to have them figure out where the good places to put these superchargers would be.
Interns are great because they don't know what's impossible. So you're just like, just do it. It's great.
And Harris Ranch was actually one of our very first supercharged stations out on Highway 5. And I just remember the craziest conversations trying to convince these ranchers from the Central Valley on how this supercharged station was possibly going to work. There were no cars yet. They'd never seen a Model S. They didn't believe an EV could even get there, let alone charge fast. It was fairly amazing how this all grew, and only 4 years ago.
Yeah, we were kind of amazed that they worked, actually. We were like, hey, wow, it works. That's cool. Most of the time. So that ended up being fundamental to really just answering the question of, like, can I drive my car long distances? And what it really comes down to is freedom. Like, when you're buying a car, you're really buying freedom to go where you want to go. If you're constrained, if you're tethered to your charge location, you don't have the freedom. So the supercharger is really about making it freedom, giving you the freedom that you want when you buy a car, and then making it real easy and convenient to go wherever you want. And then paid off the DOE loan. So I mean, it's worth noting, like, Tesla was the first company to pay off of all. So all the automotive companies had either gotten direct government grants, or they had been in the loan program. Tesla was the first company to pay off the DOE loan. And in fact, we had to pay. There was a prepayment penalty, and we actually, because you had to pay the interest plus a penalty for prepayment, because the normal loan would have been paid off over an additional 10 years, and in this case, so we paid it off 10 years early, and just paid the penalty because we just wanted to, make it clear, like, look, this, we're, I don't know, it just felt like morally the right thing to do, so that's why we did it. And then
that his goal wasn't to build the world's best electric car, but to build the world's best car that just happens to be electric. Tesla Model S.
What's been achieved here for the first time is to create an electric car that truly is the best car of any kind.
There we go.
So that was obviously a big milestone for Tesla, winning, essentially getting kind of best car in the world of any kind, not just electric. And Motor Trend told us that it was the first time that the judges had actually been unanimous in a decision. So then we actually had to manufacture these things. And it's worth dwelling on just how big a leap it was to go from making the Roadster to making the Model S. In the case of the Roadster, our annual production was maybe 500 or 600 a year, and Lotus made the body and chassis, and we made the powertrain and battery, and then we did final installation of the powertrain and battery in the car, and then delivered it to customers. So we were really, for Roadster, we were basically doing like half the car, and it was a much simpler car at very low volume. So we went from call it around 500 cars a year, where we did half the problem, to 20,000 cars a year for a much more complicated car, where we did the whole thing. This was a very steep learning curve, and very very intense. I'd just like to congratulate everyone at Tesla and the production team that made it happen and did what a lot of people in the industry considered impossible. Many late nights and weekends. So thanks, guys.
And something that we did, I think, at that time that was a bit unique is we had really all hands on deck. It wasn't that there was a factory operating smoothly somewhere and we just sort of sent them a car designed ready to go. Literally the entire engineering team, even some of the support teams, everyone was in the factory, making those lines run. We had engineering leaders, that were actually doing operations for months at a time to try and, get that moving faster. And I think that cross-learning, ended up saving us a huge amount of hassle, and it was something that we'll hope to reuse in the future.
Yeah, but it was definitely tough sledding there. We were basically there 7 days a week, all hours of the night, just trying to figure out how to make a car. But we managed to sort of achieve the target, but it was a huge amount of sacrifice by everyone. And then the Gigafactory. So we're thinking about okay, how do we go from Model S at 20,000 units a year, which is now sort of approximately 50,000 units a year, or with the Model X, almost 100,000 units a year. But we wanted to execute the goal from the beginning, which was to make a high volume, affordable electric car. And if you just do the basic math and say, okay, how many batteries do you need to do that? And if you have 500,000 cars a year and an average kilowatt hour level of 70, then you need 35 gigawatt hours. And that's just for the car. And then if you do, as we later talked about, stationary storage, then you need additional capacity on top of that. So now this is quite challenging because the total worldwide production of lithium-ion batteries of all kinds for phones, laptops, power drills, cars, everything was only 30 gigawatt hours. So we're like, okay, this math does not work. Obviously, we are not going to get every factory on Earth to just do our stuff. And even if they did, there still wouldn't be enough. So it's like, we got to build a factory here because nobody's going to, otherwise, if we don't build it, we don't know how to solve this issue.
Yeah, and it was also a chance to reinvent the way that batteries had been built. Mm-hmm. Up until this point, basically all lithium-ion factories were more or less run by consumer electronics companies. They were built in consumer electronics volumes and sort of with those methods. And we sort of had this idea that we could vertically integrate this much more and get a lot of inefficiency out of that process. Moving the upstream materials and sort of raw material processing very close to where the cells were made, and then moving the battery pack and module production right next to where the cells were made on the other side. So doing all that, we have a pathway to reduce the cost of the battery way faster than anyone expected. And ultimately, that's what makes the high volume of cars accessible at a price point that people can actually afford.
Yeah, it's worth noting, sometimes people think Tesla's just using commodity cylindrical cells meant for laptops, but this is actually not true. The standard laptop cell does not work well for an electric car. It has the same external form factor, but the internals are quite different from what would be used in a laptop. It just happens to look the same from the outside. Actually, during the Gigafactory, we wanted to reconsider even the external dimensions and did a first principles analysis of what would be most optimal, and concluded that we needed to go from an 18 millimeter diameter to a 20 millimeter diameter, and from a 65 millimeter height to a 70 millimeter height. And so that's the equipment that's really that's being installed at the Gigafactory, and that's the cell form factor we think is probably optimal. And this is in establishing the Gigafactory. This is where we first really started to think hard about the importance of building the machine that makes the machine. So how do we rethink cell production, battery module production, battery pack production, and production in general on a physics first principles basis to achieve the best possible outcome? Because we had to do that out of necessity for the Gigafactory. And then, as I'll talk about later, we're going to do that for the whole car. I should say, like the initial expectations of the Gigafactory were about 35 gigawatt hours at the cell level and 50 gigawatt hours at the pack level. So we thought we would internally produce most of the cells, but still draw upon factories in other parts of the world to make up for the rest of the cell volume, so we could get to a 50 gigawatt hour level at the module and for modules and packs. And that incremental, as I said, to get to 500,000 cars a year, you only need 35 gigawatt hours, but the other 15 gigawatt hours was meant for stationary storage. Now, as we've gotten deeper and deeper into the Gigafactory design, oops, sorry, let me go back here.
Let's release the Titan.
If it goes back.